Yeah, welcome. This is our July 2022 Canvas meeting. I'm your host, as always, Brett Nachman with College Autism Network, and we are glad to have so many of you here. We know almost all of you have joined us for past meetings, so you're probably familiar with our format. Here, we'll start off with a few updates here at College Autism Network, and for our College Autism Network Virtual Association of Scholars meetings, we highlight a team of researchers doing good work. And we're once again really thrilled to have Dr. Theo Bakker here to talk about their PhD work. It's been quite a robust set of research over recent years. So we'll get into that in just a few moments. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. And I see all of you have your microphones muted, so we appreciate you doing that in advance. If you would like to speak up at any point verbally, feel free to unmute your microphone. You're welcome to turn your video on if you would like, but that's totally up to you. We encourage you to use the chat throughout to post questions and comments, and certainly further examples of cool treats and drinks for summertime. I'm going to drop in a link to the meeting agenda in case you do not have access to that, because we want to make sure that we have your name documented, so we can put that in our meeting minutes thereafter. So just make sure your name is listed and highlighted accordingly. We definitely do appreciate that. So just a few reminders with Canvas. We recognize that most, if not all of you, are on our listserv, so we appreciate you being on that, so that way you are notified of our upcoming meetings and our meeting minutes and videos, as well as sharing resources. And we'll get into that momentarily. But I do want to turn it over to my colleague Lee, who you can see on the screen, our fearless leader, executive director of College Autism Network, to talk about our summit, which is only how many hours away, Lee? Do you have the countdown clock going?
It's like just three short months, which feels like about 3 hours to me as I try to get things done. Thanks, Brett. Yeah, so October 12th to 14th is our summit. And so, we just wrapped up our program proposal submission process and notified folks whose programs have been accepted. And I have to say, because I would say this to this group because I think you really understand this. When we planned our first summit in 2017, we were so thrilled to get any program proposals because it was all really new. And when I compare the set that we got in 2017 with the kinds of proposals that came in this for this year, the level of sophistication and complexity and depth that we see in the program proposals is just astonishing. And so much of that growth has to do with the people who were on this call, those of you who've been kind of plugging away doing this work and just really reaching for a greater level of understanding. So we'll be announcing that schedule in the next few weeks. But the other things that I wanted to mention are our opening speaker. His name is Eric Garcia, and I'm just going to drop a link here in the chat. Eric is a journalist. He's been with the Washington Post, and he's written a book called "We're Not Broken: Changing the Autism Conversation." So we're thrilled to have him as our opening speaker. And our closing session, which we haven't even formally announced yet, so you guys are getting in on this early on. If you have watched the Amazon Prime series, As We See It, which is just a great series available with your Amazon Prime subscription, we're going to have the creator and the cast of that show join us virtually for the wrap-up of the summit. So those actors are neurodivergent autistic themselves, and the show is terrific. If you haven't watched it, add it to your binge list. And come to the summit and get to know a little bit more about Sue Ann, Albert, Rick, and creator Jason Kadams. So here is the link, of course, to the summit website. and we hope to see you registering soon. Please send me a note anytime if you've got questions about the summit.
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, you heard it here first on Canvas. So I feel like there should be like a breaking news tagline or something happening right there. So thank you for that. At this point, we want to turn it over to all of you. If there are resources you would like to share, new articles that have debuted, questions you have for the community regarding projects you're working on or inquiries you have. I see that there are a few listed in the chat, so we'll start, or excuse me, listed in the meeting plan, meeting agenda. So we'll start with those folks, but if others want to contribute as well, you're welcome to do so in either format. TC, would you like to talk about your recent article? Well, we might need to, oh, my mute is not unmuting. Oh no. You might need to, if you can't unmute, it might be necessary to come back into the meeting momentarily and see if that does the trick, but that is a technical issue. Let's give you a minute. Lauren, I see you're on the call. I'm not sure if you want to talk about your project.
Sure. Hey, folks. My name's Lauren, she, her pronouns. I'm a grad student at UCLA. My doctoral work is focused on a study that looks at the experiences of autistic LGBTQ young adults and their experiences with mental health care and healthcare access. Brett is working with me on that as well as other folks. And so I actually had put that in the meeting minutes, but we did reach our recruitment targets, yay. So we have a full study right now. But I will actually replace that flyer link with a link that people can sign up if they want information about future studies, if they are interested in studies that are focused on similar things. So I'll pop that in there, but yeah, appreciate this space to talk about it. And hopefully you'll be hearing more about our study and some preliminary results at the conference, at the summit. So thanks, y'all, and great to be here.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, we the target was as far as number of participants we hit very, very early, so which was great. And yeah, the summit will be a nice way to showcase some of that early info. TC, checking back with you. I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself. Mute is not working, but we'll put the link in the chat. Okay. Perfect. Yes, TC and their colleagues have the recent piece on barriers to inclusive learning for autistic individuals. So, and yes, you probably saw earlier this week, I sent out an email through the Canvas listserv of some examples of recent articles that have debuted over just the past several months on autism in higher education. So we encourage you all to continue to pass those along when those debut. But are there other resources or updates that folks want to share with the community? Because I know there's a lot of good stuff happening amongst everyone. I think folks are still thinking about the ice cream and the treats that we're talking about a few minutes ago. That must be it. If there are other things that come to mind that you want to pass along, feel free to do so, because we definitely want to make sure we're widely sharing the projects that we're working on and good things that will benefit our community. So at this point, let's turn it over to our featured presenter, who has been a past Canvas presenter. So I feel like we might need to be starting like an all-timers club of sorts. You might be first on that list, Theo. So Dr. Theo C. Bakker Yeah, you probably saw Theo's work disseminated or shared out on our Canvas listserv a few months ago with the completion of his PhD. And this is going to serve as a space to kind of illustrate the various studies, piece of the study that Theo has been working on. You can access Theo's slides if you'd like in our meeting agenda. And yes, thank you, Theo, for putting in the chat a link to the actual thesis if you'd like to read it beyond what is shared today. So we'll turn it over to Theo. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to input, please do so in the chat, and we'll allocate some time at the end for those questions to be addressed. So over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very happy to present my my findings, especially because, well, it felt quite recently that I presented my work for the first time. And I'm very happy to see some people listening into this meeting that I cited as well. So thank you very much for all the things you published. I'll share my screen now to present you the findings. Just to check, does everyone see this pencils in the image, in the screen? Yeah, great. Okay, so I studied progression and success of autistic students in higher education, and I used a method called propensity score weighting. So that's the subtitle, a longitudinal propensity score weighted population study. A little bit about myself. My name is Theo Bakker, or in English, Theo Bakker, and I work at the University of Applied Sciences of The Hague. At the moment, my PhD I finished in June at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and from January the 1st, I'll become professor in learning technology and analytics at the same university, and hopefully I will continue this research together with the Vrije Universiteit. So before we start, I would like to ask you all to pick a color from this pencil, and I'm using this example because that's what I used also in the presentation of my in my defense. So just pick a color of one pencil and we use it later on. The first question would be, why do I study students with autism? To me, it's about making everybody count. To me, it's very important that every student has, for him or herself, a place in higher education, and that we think about their personal circumstances, and they can maximum benefit from the education and fully develop as individuals, as said by Vincent Tinto. And another quotation from my quote from my PhD thesis is from Will Kimlicka, who says, "The accommodation of differences is the essence of true equality." So these are, for me, the personal drivers why I study students with autism. What led to this research? As we all know, an increasing number of students with autism are entering higher education, but we know little about them. And when I started this study 4 years ago, Gelbar and others just published a survey of the existing research, and at that time only 23 articles were found, with, I believe, about 150 students. A lot of qualitative research is there, and they report academic barriers or social barriers, but also mental health problems and limited academic success. However, these problems are, in my opinion, not unique to students with autism. We find those problems as well for other students. This is from my personal experience after working for 20 years in higher education. Important is that data was scarce on study progression and success, and often participants don't have formal autism diagnosis. And very few studies compare students with autism to other students. So I wanted to improve upon these shortcomings. So my research question was, what's unique about the study progression and success of autistic students in higher education compared to students with other disabilities and without disabilities? I did so by examining 4 sub-questions. The first one is, what's their background and enrollments? What are similarities and what are differences? This was my first paper. And then I followed up with 2 papers on study progression in the first year and one on the second and the third year in graduation. So it was all about bachelor students in the Netherlands. And the Netherlands is situated, of course, in Europe. And there's another thing, most studies were from United Kingdom or USA or Australia, so more Anglo-Saxon research. From these 3 studies, I built in my final article several machine learning models to predict success. And I'll come back to that later, of course. Who did I research and what makes my research unique? There was a large sample of 7 cohorts of the Vrije Universiteit from 2010 till 2016. And for each student, I had 3 years of student data for each student. And here you see the numbers, a little bit more than 100 students with autism, 2,500 students with other disabilities, and 25,000 students without disabilities. And all these students, they, when they enrolled, they noticed that they had this disability, and they did so to apply for accommodations, academic accommodations. And in doing so, they had to provide proof of their diagnosis, and the diagnosis was checked by checking if the physician who had given this diagnosis was registered in a national registration of physicians in the Netherlands. I was lucky to be able to use formal institutional data. It was also complete on study progression and success. And as I said, diagnoses were formal, and I was able to compare them to other students. What could I study? Their backgrounds, preparation, and also study progression and success. Backgrounds such as gender, age, very important secondary school grades, and highest education. Especially these grades were important because they were, of course, a proxy for IQ. And it's very important in these kind of studies to have to be able to already know something about their past and their success in former studies. For preparation, did they visit open days? Did they come to the campus on campus tours? Did they attend the introduction? We also have this thing called matching in the Netherlands, that every student has a formal interview and a language test in Dutch. And for study progression, I had data on did they attend examinations, what results did they get, how many credits, and dropout rates and degrees. It's quite exceptional that I was able to study this data, and the reason I was able to do so because of an exception for conducting scientific research, because of the disproportionate effort to reach all these 28,000 students. I could use this without consent. The data was anonymized, and so I didn't know which students were behind it, and I was not permitted to contact them in any way to ensure privacy. Now I come to the results. So the first question was, what makes them unique? And when we look to background and enrollment, on average, these students are with autism are 1 year older than other students. They are 20 years, more often male, and more often they have a non-formal education. In the Netherlands, that's called colloquium. It means a 21+ test for people who are age 21 or state examinations. And this is quite an important aspect because we see that many students from in higher education or in high school, drop out of high school, and then in some way they tutor themselves or do these state examinations to enroll in higher education. We also saw more often comorbidity with ADHD and dyslexia. We see similar things if we look to the grades, they're equally good in grades in high school. They prepare very well to transfer to the university. They attend open days, go to campus tours, and go to introduction. And they plan to put a lot of time in their studies. So if we ask them how much time will you attend college, they say 40 hours a week. And they don't tend to say that they're going to work next to it or go to extracurricular activities for students. And more often they have STEM study programs. If we compare these students to these different groups, there's something important, of course, that they are different not only in background, but also in size. So how can we statistically compare 101 students on the one hand with over 25,000 students on the other hand? To do so, I used a method called propensity score weighting. And at this point in the presentation, I used this example using pencils. So for instance, if you take myself and my two paronyms at the defense, George and Ellen, and we would match ourselves to you as a group. First, we would look at who's male and who's female in this example. Then the age. So I'm 52. And at the end, the pencils. And in this presentation, I had that yellow pencil, and George and Ellen had the red pencil. And of course, when you match one-to-one, many attendants will drop out because there's no equal match. This is a problem in these kind of studies. And to solve this, you can apply what's called propensity score weighting, which I explain now. So what we want to do is to compare students with autism on the right-hand side to students without autism. And we use the distribution in this case of age, for instance. And as we see, autistic students are on average 20 years old, while students without autism are on average 19 years old. But of course, many students with autism are a little bit older or younger. And so is the case with students without autism. So the next step is that we apply weights to students who are younger. They count for less, and students who are older, they tend to count a little bit more. So every student we want to compare them with gets a small weight. And in this way, we change the distribution of the corresponding groups. And so I corrected for gender, age, highest prior education, high school math grades, and cohort. And in this way, I was able to reduce the amount of students without autism to 92.3 and could compare them statistically to autistic students. And I did the same with students with other disabilities. And these weights are used in every subsequent study. And then I get to the results corrected using propensity score weighting. In this graph, you see the results from the first year. So T is term 1, 2, etc. And then on the y-axis, you see the grades, the credits. And the red group is students with autism, and the blue dotted line are students without autism. And as you can see, when you apply these weights, the differences are very, very small. So we only see less credits in the third term around Christmas. The gray line is the credits these students all could get if they would succeed in every examination. So it's important to see that every student at the beginning has difficulty in finishing examinations, but it looks that students with autism are a little bit more successful in picking up the pace. In the same way, I studied resits, attempts, and no-shows, and then very important aspect is that students with autism have more no-shows in the third term. We looked at dropout and degree completion. We didn't find any difference over there, to my surprise, to be honest. And then in the second and the third article, we looked also into differences in the second and third year, no differences in grades as well, and less research in the second year, and also more no-shows in the second year. Then the third article, we use structural equation modeling to build a model about for the associations between events in the first year, the second year, and the third year. And then we found that if you want to have a look at the what you call the chance of success, that with neurotypical students or students without with other disabilities, you can look at their credits. But for students with autism, you have to look at the amount of no-shows in the second year to see if they will be successful in the third year. So this was quite interesting. And to me, the question was why? What are the mechanisms behind these patterns? And this is what I studied in the fourth article, which will be hopefully published soon, as we submitted it to Autism. So on the right-hand side, you see that for dropouts in the first year, there were more issues on the short term with study choice, uncertainty, or self-overestimation. I'll get to that in the next slide. And for delay in the third year, we see all the students with irregular privileged educations, and those are factors that hint to problems, longer term problems also in high school. So with participation in general, in a way, how well do these students fit into the system? Very important is that we don't see anything related to IQ or academic capabilities. So on the last paper, we developed a lot of machine learning models. To be honest, I built well, maybe 100 models. It was also to find that it didn't depend on the type of model what you found. An important aspect to measure the success of a model is what is called the no information rate, which is the largest group in a population study. For instance, at this part, 42.9% of the students, which you can see over here in the third year, in the test group, would get a degree. So the model would have to predict better than 42.9 success, and that's called the lift. So in this article, the accuracy was 64.3%. So the lift for students with autism using machine learning is in predicting over 20%. This is interesting, but to me, more important was the underlying mechanisms, which is in the next slide. And that I try to understand by looking at the factors that are important or not important. And as you can see in the first year, how darker the cell, the more important is that factor in the prediction. And then you see different patterns between students with autism, AS, and other students. So in the first year, it's more important to look at parallel programs. So students with autism with parallel programs tend to drop out more than other students, while other students, you can look at their date of application or their grade in high school. And if you think about this, you can think that this is related to the amount of stress maybe a student will have to do two studies. It's not about their intelligence, but it's more, I think, more about how well do they understand how tough it is to study in the university. And then if we look at the dropout in this after 2 years, we see more long-term issues reflected in age, because students who have problems in the high school, they drop out, or they have to take a year again, or they go from several types of education to the next one, and it takes them more time to get to the university. So age reflects previous problems in high school. And these are also important in the third year. But next to that, students who finish within 3 years, which is quite exceptional. We see that very intelligent students with high grades in high school, they tend to finish in time. So that's about the third year. So to conclude, we don't see any differences in grades, dropout, or degree completion, but we do see difference in exam participations, more no-shows, and where students without autism tend to go to examination and they just try to finish it and get their grades. We think students with autism tend to procrastinate, or if they think about their examinations, they might think they are not good enough and they won't go there, even if they would have succeeded, which is possible. Other explanations would be skills to study appropriately, executive functions. Key predictors, year 1 is related to study choice, in year 2 participation in high school, in year 3 participation in high school, but also success in high school. Then to finish up, how could you use these results to improve support? First of all, to ease transition, disclosure is very important. So encourage disclosure, and hopefully my research will have given some insights that students with autism can be successful in higher education in the Netherlands. So we will change the information for upcoming students. At the moment, the start of information is was very factual. It has little emotion in it, and we tend to change it to have success stories of students with autism who finished university. The next one is support study choice. So in their first year success, how well do they know themselves? How well can they choose one or more studies? And then the second year, we found that social and executive skills are more important to focus on, also in asking other students for help. And in the final year, support academic skills. And this is, by the way, not different from other students. So in this way, they are, again, similar to neurotypical students or students with other disabilities. Then the list of the publications, all published in open access. And to finish, this beautiful piece of text from the article by Lord, now is the time for optimism with acknowledgement of the potential for change that is present in different ways at different times for autistic students and for the communities in which they live. And that's my presentation for now.
Very well done. You packed a lot of information into just under 25 minutes, so very impressive. And I think the visuals were really additive. I know there are already some questions that have emerged in the chat. We'll just share them verbally just for making sure they're recorded. And please, if there are other questions that emerge, feel free to put them in the chat or share them aloud. Yes, getting some virtual applause as well. So TC has a question. What is the general attitude toward autistic individuals in the community and in higher ed in the Netherlands?
I think it's positive. Of course, by law, we are also having a lot of improvements for supporting students with who need support. What wasn't known until now is that it is that many of these students finish get a degree and continue to study, for instance, 2 master's studies. So this is there's this idea that students with autism are having a very hard time, and I don't say that they don't have problems, but it's not impossible for them to finish a bachelor or a master, and of course become successful also in work. So it's in general, it's I think positive and becoming more positive because a lot of research is done at the moment. A parallel program, it's a second study. So for instance, you study both mathematics and econometrics. And we see certain combinations are easier, for instance, combinations of science and mathematics, but we also see combinations with psychology and law, and this is in general for students without autism easier to accomplish than for students with autism. And I think I have to look it up in English, the words, one moment. Yeah, it's about the load capacity. They can take enough hours to study. So I think with autism, normally you always say to students, you have to work hard. I think you have to say to students with autism, you have to work less hard and more effective. That's maybe strange to hear, but they I think they apply too much time to their studies. Hopefully, we can prove that as well in the next years. Yeah, exam accommodations there are, for instance, additional time or a quiet room. And very important is that in the Netherlands, we have this thing is called a binding study advice. So after 1 year, you have to have at least 45 credits to continue. And you can ask for postponement of this. And many students with autism, and they ask for this, and they are it's granted as well. But because I thought, well, this may be the explanation why we don't see differences, but the same applies to many other students with other disabilities, and we found difference between these groups. In general, the accommodations, I think that all these students we see in this study, they have had some kind of, they asked for accommodations. We don't know for sure if they were granted as well. But I think that the quite successful story we see here maybe, of course, will be influenced by the fact that all these students were able to get these accommodations. So there's a bias, of course, in these results. But then again, I forgot to tell, the prevalence is 0.4, which is low. So many students with autism didn't disclose their autism. Maybe they didn't need it because they were able to succeed without accommodations, and many of them might not have wanted to disclose it or didn't know that they had autism. I'm going now to the formal. Yeah. Yes. For Lauren, it's indeed formal diagnosis, which is according to the APA standards with the DSM-4. And indeed, all students had to upload a document with their formal diagnosis and with the name of the clinicians. And these clinicians were checked in this nationwide registry. So the chain of evidence is to be honest, very straight. Yeah.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to, yeah.
Go ahead.
Want to ask something in person, that's also fine, of course, and also about my answers for now. or I can tell you something about, speak about transition supports. Unlike, I think, the situation in the United States, we don't have so many students working on a IEP. It's quite interesting that we don't have it. I think that would be best if it would be introduced. What we do see is that many of these students, they attend these open days or they go to college tours, and at these happenings, we always had this booth with support officers there who could tell about the benefits. We also have at the VU is general counseling for students with autism, which is done by psychology students with masters. So, and at the moment, we're going to start with a support group with fellow students. So it's evolving, but it's not the same as we would find maybe in the United States. Maybe a few minutes about the next research we hope to do. Yeah, of course, we stopped after 3 years. Many students, not only students with autism, but also other students, they take 4 or 5 years, and hopefully we will be able to study these 4th and 5th years as well, and maybe even if they go to a master student study. So we don't know that yet. That hopefully will be continued. Yeah.
I'll chime in with a question as we perhaps await for some other ones to emerge. What was really interesting, and mind you, there's so much to digest among all the pieces of data that you shared with everybody. But what really struck me were that there weren't as many differences as you imagined when you were comparing autistic students versus students with other disabilities versus those with none across different criteria. Do you have any suppositions for why there weren't?
Well, maybe it's I think because of the propensity score rating of the first hand. The other thing is in the Netherlands, because some people ask, can this Dutch research be transferred to other countries? The conclusions, and it's good to know that in the Netherlands, we've got a very small country, and it sounds silly, but it's a flat country, so we have a lot of good connections by public transports to universities. You can get to a university in 45 minutes anywhere where you live. So that makes it able for students with autism to stay at home, to live at their own place with their existing support structure. And I think that's, for us in the Netherlands, it's normal, but it makes us very different from maybe other countries. Another thing is that the level of the universities is how the ranking is almost equal. We don't have, like in the UK or in the United States, a huge difference between very expensive higher universities and more lower ranked universities. We've got good public funding for students. Of course, everybody still complains it's a lot, but you can get a grant, and you can attend with a proper degree. You can enroll in higher education. So I think that's quite a difference. What is important to know is that we have a double system in the Netherlands for higher education, unlike USA. And there we see that students with ethnic backgrounds, or I think also with autism, are more prone to take a longer route. So they have to do they are normally, I think, sorry for this, I can't get the English words, but they tend to be kept down in a way to take the easier route at first, and then later on, of course, they want to continue their studies, and it takes them more time. So in a way, that is like there's something to improve upon. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate all that context. That's really helpful, especially for those of us who don't know all the nuances with the Netherlands and distinctions there. So thank you for that. Are there other questions that are on folks' minds as we wrap up? We do have time.
I have a question maybe for other attendees. I was wondering if there is anyone who is planning to do a larger data-driven study, because I'm still interested in this kind of studies at the moment. I know in Australia there's been developments, and of course there's this in the United States we've got this national studies. But up until now, I'm feeling a little bit alone in this kind of research. So. No.
I think people are planning to conduct this work. But I think
maybe.
But Sasha, I think you're unmuted. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I was just going to say that, here the National Longitudinal Transition Study data set was, I think they're supposed to come out with the NLTS 3 at some point, and I might you have to apply to work with that data. It's like pretty strict requirements about the way that you keep the data locked and stuff, but I thought it was coming out like a few years ago. So I don't know. Does anybody know what's happening with that data? No. So we should have a new longitudinal data set.
Okay.
I think it's very interesting that the way that you were able to access the data. That's very cool. I don't know I don't know how we could do that here. I'm not sure.
No. And the NLTS, of course, is I use it quite a lot in my study. But the issue with it, to me, is that you don't see what is happening. You see it at the beginning and the end of the studies, but not in between. So hopefully there will be an extension with data more in between before beginning and ending their career in education. Yeah, that would be important, I think.
Well, I think you've given all of us a lot to think about here. And looks like Julie has a comment. I'm intrigued by the second year and third year student results. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very important remark. Many students with autism, they don't know that if they apply for these accommodations, they don't have to disclose to the teachers or in this case, supervisors, what's the reason for their accommodation. So you can disconnect the accommodation with the reason for it, of course. No, that's a great example what you're writing. Thanks. I think there's also a lot of research from Belgium, which is also very interesting, from Hayes. She wrote a lot about barriers and accommodations as well. Yeah. Okay.
Any final thoughts that you want to share with the community there, Theo, in terms of
no, thank you very much for having this opportunity, and I feel a bit strange because it seems like a few years ago that I was just starting it, and now I'll be able to present you these great findings. That's amazing to me. Yeah, so I'm very happy.
Well, we're really all appreciative for the work that you're doing and just
Yeah.
the longitudinal nature and the scale of it. So I think it's going to be continue to be very informative for folks. So thank you again, getting some thanks in the comments as well. So we're going to just wrap things up here. So to give everybody a little bit of context of what's coming up with Canvas. So we are back to our monthly meetings after that June break, as we usually do. So in August, we're going to have Amber Myers from Tarrant County College talking about recruiting autistic high school students into dual credit classes. Caden Stockwell will be presenting in September. We'll have Brian Irvine in October, and then in November we'll have Tom Beeson and Alan Olker from Clemson. So it'll be really great to have a variety of folks talking about different aspects of autism in post-secondary education. So again, please stay tuned for your emails on the Canvas listserv for updates about those meetings and other resources. Yeah, we look forward to having you all join us then and or watching a video recording thereafter. And we hope you have a good rest of your week. Thanks for joining us.